Start the meeting with the pledge, if we can all rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag. Thank you. Tonight is Tuesday, August 15th. You are here for the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. In the event of a fire or other emergency, please follow the exit signs provided in this room and throughout Town Hall. Upon exiting the room, the main exits are located to the front and rear of the building. Do not use the elevator. This meeting is being recorded and will stream live online. If you do not want to wait to hear the outcome of any one particular item on the agenda, you can call the clerk's office tomorrow after 9 a.m. to get the results of that decision. The next meeting will be September 19th, 2023 at 6:30 here in this building. If we could start by calling the roll. Present.
Present.
In addition, we have Deputy Town Attorney Nora Robshaw and Daniel Latowski present as well. If we could have first on the agenda a motion with respect to the minutes from last month's meeting.
So moved.
Second.
I will abstain because I was not present. Do we have any opposition? Okay, so that motion carries 4-0 with one abstention being me. We do have several items on the agenda tonight. However, we have requests to adjourn 3 of those items. If we could at first just maybe do motions to adjourn to get those out of the way. I know that the petitioner for item number 4, 391 Lakewood Parkway, had asked for an adjournment. I would move to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any opposition? Hearing none, that item will be adjourned. That carries 5-0. The next item with a request for an adjournment is number 10, 3275 and 3325 Millersport Highway. I will move to adjourn till next month's meeting. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll speak louder. We have a second. Does anyone oppose? No opposition. So item number 10 will be adjourned. We also had a request to adjourn item number 11 on the agenda, which is 4196 Sheridan Drive. I will move to adjourn. Do we have a second? Second. Any opposition? Hearing none, that will carry 5-0. That leaves us with 10 other items on the agenda for tonight. We will start with item number 1, 231 Kings Highway. If the petitioner can come forward, all petitioners should come forward when called. Sign in your name and address, and also state name and address so that we know who you are. But we will hear first from 231 Kings Highway.
Thank you. My name is Ronald Samoji. I'm the owner of 231 Kings Highway, and I've never been before board, so I'm a little nervous. And I guess I was a little confused about the forms, and I didn't realize that I was coming. So I did take a few more photos. I made copies. Can I?
You can bring them up and we can display them on the overhead.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, you made copies for each one of us? Okay. What we'll do is we'll just display them up so everyone can see, if that's okay. Oh, yeah, it looks like we might already have these in our packets.
Some of them, one you might, I don't, Zen and Ritter gave me different things, and there was a little confusion there. This must be a Zen and Ritter photo because it's in color. This is the back of my house. So basically in this corner is the work area where my workbench, the furnace is there, the electrical units are there, and the wash tub is there. So everything I need is in this corner. Unfortunately, I have a deck here, so I didn't want to put it there. So I'm left with putting it on the side right in front of that tree. Now, so this is a photo of my house from basically there are driveways on both sides. There's very little grass. It's a narrow lot. And I estimated I have on the right side in the back, there's a little confusion with some of the numbers, but there's a fence there that doesn't exist anymore. So that's 5.22 from the fence. Then I realized there's also 0.21. The fence was 0.21 west of the border line. So the actual distance would be 5.43 to the end of my lot. Now I understand I need 3 feet by the code for an HVAC unit, and I'm planning either to go with a compressor or something called a dual hybrid heat pump. I haven't decided. Originally, I was told they're going to be 24 by 24. Now I'm hearing it's going to be either 32 by 32 or 36 by 36. So if it's 36, that's about 1.5 feet over the code line. I have a letter in here from my neighbors on this west side, the Schaefers, who don't have any problem with me putting one there. And I also looked at, had photos, and I have at least 3 adjoining properties of me that have their compressor less than 36 inches. I have the photo. This is the east side of my house. The people have a compressor there, and I measured that to be 32 inches, but their fence is within their property line, so it's probably close to 30, somewhere between 28 and 30 inches. And this is another photo on Harlem, and again, this adjoins my property and the southeast part. This compressor I measured to be about 30 inches from the property line. And lastly, I have the property in back of me has 2 compressors, and I have the gentleman who lives in the house here standing on their property line. His compressor is 30 inches, and this gentleman's compressor is 19 inches from the property line. So this is a common occurrence in Snyder. The lots are very narrow. They weren't planned for compressors. And with the heat going up, I would like to find a way to cool off my downstairs because I have an open downstairs. I don't have doors there to put in units in the windows, and the window would be heavy too. There'd be like 10, 12,000 units, and I'm not going to be able to lift those things. So that's basically where I'm at.
Okay. Do we have any questions from the board? No. Okay.
I have one question. The neighbor that wrote the letter is the one in the yellow house?
In the yellow house, yes. Okay.
Okay. Do we have anyone here from the audience to speak on this petition? Seeing no one come forward, we'll close the hearing the public hearing at this time. Do we have any motions from the board?
I'd like to move to approve.
Second.
Okay. Do we have any opposition? No? And I will just state for the record that I believe that the petitioner has met the balancing tests in his papers and here tonight. If anyone feels any differently, they can speak now. No one is speaking. So the motion carries 5-0, and you're all set, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, next up on the agenda, item number 2 is 24 Glen Meadow Drive South.
Good evening. My name is Jim Warbeck. I and my wife Deborah are the owners of 24 Glen Meadow South, which is a new development off of Dodge Road between Casey and North French. My request today is for a variance for installing a generator. We'd like to put a whole house generator in, which I think for this particular patio home, it's requires 5 feet. As you can see from the drawing, basically I've got 6 1/3 feet, so roughly 76 inches. The generator itself is a 2 by 4 foot unit. It's a Generac, which is pretty common among generators. Are all pretty much the same size, and it does require a pad, which would be a 3 by 5 foot foundation for it. The installer is Gentech. They use a foam pad so that it eliminates noise as much as possible. Looks a little bit neater than the stone, and can be maintained between properties. I do have a photo, unfortunately it's on my phone, that would show the distance, but the home next door is going to be about the same distance. I think it's a little bit less, maybe 3.5 to 4 feet, that has the distance from the foundation to the property line. I further believe that patio homes, to have condo status, have a certain requirement as to the distance or the lot sizes that they can have, so there's not a lot we can do that way. The alternatives would be to move to the north side of the house, which will have a similar situation, or to the back of the house, which then gets in the little backyards that both properties share. So it's not a common area, but all the backyards are similar. There's a drainage ditch that runs behind, or it's actually retention, and then wetlands behind that. The request is made so that it's most readily accessible to both the gas and the electric outlets. It would feed right downstairs, which is where the breaker box is located. And we basically need to get it requires 18 inches to exhaust properly from the housing unit. We basically need a variance of, I think it's 12 to 14 inches, depending on what you're looking at for the pad and the generator, to be set on, so that it could be set up nearest to the access to utilities and to the power box.
Okay.
Don't have much more.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions from the board?
What is it, this is a condominium?
It has condo status. They're patio homes, though.
What's the name of the condominium?
It's Essex Development. It's the Preserve at Glen Meadow.
Okay, in essence, has no, I noticed they own the lot next door, which is vacant.
Actually, there's a house on that property right now.
I assume they've been notified and they're not.
Yes.
So is there an owner next door?
Yes.
Have they indicated their support? Have they moved in?
We told them we're looking to put a generator. They basically said they don't have a problem with it. I didn't get anything in writing from them, though. We only just met them, so they moved in like 10 days ago.
Anyone else? No? Okay. Do we have anyone from the audience here to speak on this petition? Okay, seeing no one come forward, we'll close the public hearing at this time. I think that you've gone through the balancing test quite well. Do we have a motion?
Motion approved?
I'll second. Do we have any opposition or discussion? Hearing no opposition, the motion carries 5-0, and you're all set.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Have a good night.
You too.
Up next on the agenda is item number 379 Shetland Drive.
Good evening. I'm Jessica Boudreau with the Engineering Department. I'm here representing the town on the proposed playground improvements at Dana Heights Park. It's located at 79 Shetland Drive. So we're requesting variances for the recreation area setback as well as landscaping. The required setback is 50 feet. And as you can see on the west, we are only proposing 17.4, 36.3 on the south, and 48 on the east. I'll just point out that black outline in the northwest corner is an existing playground. So we're actually shifting the playground a little bit to the east to help out on that 17.4 setback. And then the rear yard setback can't be achieved because of ADA requirements. We're trying to make it accessible, and so we had to push it back to get the proper slope. And then the other variance is the landscaping. It's about 6/10 of an acre, and there's 14 pretty mature trees on there. So we're gonna save money, we're gonna save all those trees, and hopefully get a variance on the landscaping. And,
Okay.
that's about it. Do you want me to run through the criterias?
Yeah, that would be great.
All right. So, number one is the character of the neighborhood. No undesirable change will be produced in the character of the neighborhood. There will not be a detriment to nearby properties if this variance is granted. We're not changing the use of the site, only upgrading playground equipment. The existing playground equipment, as I noted, is already in non-compliance on the west side. Number two is other alternatives. Given the size of the property, the grade of the property, the proposed playground footprint cannot be achieved without obtaining these setbacks. Is this substantial? We don't believe this is substantial in nature. As noted, the existing playground equipment is currently not in compliance, sits about 14 feet from the side property line. We intend to push that in about 3.5 more feet. The rear yard variance is also not substantial and is required for ADA accessibility. And then the east is only 2 feet, so. For physical and environmental conditions, the proposed variance will not have adverse impact on the physical or environmental conditions in the neighborhood. The site usage is remaining the same. Not self-created. Although self-created, upgrades to the existing playground would be very difficult within the existing zoning requirements. And then benefit to applicant. This variance will allow upgrades to the existing playground equipment and surface material, providing a benefit to the entire surrounding community.
Okay. Do we have any questions? Is there anyone here from the audience to speak on this petition? Okay, seeing nobody come forward, we'll close the public hearing at this time. Do we have any motions? I'll second. Do we have any opposition? Nope. Okay, motion carries 5-0. All set. All right, next up on the agenda tonight is item number 5, which is 136 Cherrywood Drive.
I'm Mike O'Neill at 136 Cherrywood Drive. Okay.
That's adjourned.
I started this project 6-7 years ago. There were full-grown scrub pines and everything in front, 6-foot rock garden, clearing all this stuff out. The last thing was a tree in my backyard, which I had to go through the fence. So I figured I'd do the old fence, not the new one. Now I go ahead and do the fence, and I guess there was something passed last year in October or something like that, I didn't know anything about this. So I went ahead with it. They put the posts in, and then I was stopped. All I want to do is line it up with the other fence of my neighbor on the property line instead of where it is now.
Okay.
I had pictures there. I don't know if you got them or not. Okay.
I mean, I have them. I didn't know if he wanted to talk about them at all.
There. See, my neighbor did his last year, and it's out at the property line. So I just lined the new fence up with it and found out you can't do that. So this is a shock to me. And if I have to pull them posts out again, it's gonna cost me more than the fence. So,
So it would be a significant financial hardship to move the posts?
yes, I'm retired.
Okay.
I work slow, so I took the time to do it right, but it was, yeah, see, there's a dog leg like it jogs, and I'd like to eliminate that and line it up straight, so it looks much better.
Yeah.
And on the other side of the fence near my driveway, I get to put, if I get the variance, I get to put an 8-foot gate in to get machinery to do landscaping in the yard.
Okay.
There, right.
Okay. Is that it?
I guess.
Does anyone have questions? No? Okay. Do we have anyone here in the audience to speak on the petition? Okay, seeing no one come forward, we'll close the public hearing at this time. Do we have a motion with respect to the petition?
Second.
Do we have any opposition? Hearing none, the motion is granted 5-0. You're all set.
Thank you.
Nice and easy, right? All right. Next up on the agenda is item number 6. That's 266 Sagewood Terrace. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Joseph Rotella. Just a little background of the variance I want for the 6-foot privacy fence. My wife and I had both been residents of the town of Amherst for over 40 years. We both moved out of town and returned a couple years later so we could raise our children the way we were raised in the town. I've been employed by the town of Amherst as a police officer since 2001. My wife, Cynthia, moved into her house in 2004. I moved in about 10 years later in 2014. We were married in 2015. In September 2018, we purchased a house 19 houses away on Sagewood Terrace. We moved, we wanted to stay in the area. In 2020, one of my flags was ripped down, shredded, and thrown in the middle of the street. Also, people have reached over our current fence and stolen vegetables out of our garden. Even though our boys are grown and over 20 years old, we currently want to stay living in this house until we retire and grow old. And it'll be our last home, hopefully. So the first picture I have is of our current fence. Chain link fence runs along the property line. The second picture I have is showing our fence in line with the neighbor's fence to the rear of our house. That's all we want to do is keep the same line. The next picture I have is showing if we move our fence 10 feet over, it would open a gap for the neighbor's backyard. The next picture I have is a picture of what the fence would look like if we were to replace it. That's the type of fence we want, and that's the type we requested. The next picture I have is going north on Sagewood Terrace, approaching the stop sign. You can barely see the corner of the fence as you pass our garage. You have a sight line, see most of Fifth Avenue. The next picture is an overhead shot of where I was taking that picture. And I drew the sight line straight across so you can see a lot of Fifth Avenue there. The next picture is coming down Fifth Avenue west. or east, I'm sorry, approaching the stop sign. As you can see most of Sagewood, or a lot of Sagewood Avenue as you approach the stop sign. You can also see that our patio, kitchen, and bedroom window are exposed to the street. And then the last picture is the overhead map showing the sight line of where I was taking that picture and what you can see on Sagewood and Fifth Avenue.
Does anybody have any questions?
Just a couple of comments, actually.
Yes.
I'm surprised that the property line is in so far away from the street, because typically property lines are very close to the sidewalk. I can't tell, I drove by there and I can't tell how far your chain link is from the sidewalk. but
It's approximately 7 feet from the sidewalk, about 21 feet from the street.
And you'll be lining up with the falling down fence then?
Correct. And I did attempt to speak with a neighbor several times, but I haven't seen her since May, and it looks like the house is vacant as we speak.
And you will be lining up with her.
Yes. That's all I want to do is replace the chain link with the one fence that I have in the picture, and it will line up with that fence.
Anyone else have questions? Okay, do we have anyone here from the audience to speak on this petition? Seeing no one come forward, we'll close the public hearing at this time. I do feel like we went through the test, but does anyone have any other comments to add?
I have a comment. So I'm just noticing like this general trend that this board is facing of requests for variance on fences, and then they're always using the neighbors as a comp of what their distance from their property line should be, and I'm not sure why we have so many fences in this town that are not within the zoning code, and then when it gets to this board, it's, neighbors are rightfully asking that they have a fence comparable to what their neighbors have, and I think this board is, of the opinion if there's no neighbors objecting to it, to grant that variance, but I'm not sure what the solution to this is, but it's just, it's a general trend that is sort of, frustrating that, we have to have, to go through this, every meeting where we have multiple of these where my neighbor has this, why can't I have this? And I understand their frustration. But that's the only point I wanted to make.
I think we join your sentiment, the rest of
Can
the
I
board.
just comment on, that's one of the reasons I brought up, because I noticed a lot of first of all, Dana Heights, it seems everybody has a fence.
Yes.
That doesn't comply, everybody. What I noticed was peculiar about yours is your fence is so far away from the sidewalk. A lot of the ones that we're looking at now are like 1 foot from the sidewalk or 2 feet from the sidewalk. And they're all lining up, we're lining those up with the neighbors. Yours, you said, is 7 feet from the sidewalk, which is totally different, but yeah.
Honestly, I was totally shocked when the building department told me I would have to move it 10 feet. So,
You went through, you know Dana Heights.
yes.
I think every single house has a fence that's not in compliance.
Okay, so let's go back to the vote.
Did we?
Did anyone move to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, all right. Do we have any opposition? Hearing no opposition, the motion is granted 5-0.
Thank you very much.
All right. Next up on the agenda is item number 75169 Sheridan Drive.
All right, good evening, everyone. So my name is Levi Stutzman. I'm from Fast Signs in Erie, Pennsylvania, and we work with Quickfill closely on implementing their branding. And here in Amherst, we're looking at adding the Quickfill branding to their canopy signage. We have an old picture in there from before they redid their canopy, and we also have the proposed graphics. So the canopy is recognized as signage in this case. So the existing pylon sign is pretty much right at the allowed amount of signage. So the canopy would put us over that amount. So we are requesting a variance to implement the graphics on the canopy like they once were, but with Quickfill's renewed branding.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Does anyone have comments or questions?
So there, if I may, so there are two pieces, the quick fill, and one piece on the other side, the Driving America. So you're actually,
Right. Yeah, that's the only real branding element. The rest of it's kind of just a decorative graphic.
Do all the quick fills have that Driving America?
Yes. Yeah. Any of the newer branding ones that we've updated.
Any other questions? Is it illuminated?
It is not illuminated.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, is anyone here from the audience to speak on this? Okay, no one is here coming forward, so we'll close the public hearing at this time. Do we have a motion? I'll second. Any opposition? Hearing no opposition, the motion carries 5-0.
Perfect.
All
Thank
set.
you.
Next up on the agenda is item number 8, 190 Maple Road. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, I'm Jeff Palumbo. I represent the petitioners this evening. You all may be very familiar with this parcel. It is the Northwest Cardiology Building located at the corner of Maple Road and Maple Mere. Since this has been going on for some time, I thought I'd give you just a brief history of what's been before you in the past. This started out back in 2016, 2017 with a rezoning application for this property that's zoned R3. That rezoning was denied by the town board, and ultimately an application was filed with the Zoning Board of Appeals for a use variance for the cardiology center. That use variance was granted in 2017 with a number of conditions, only 2 of which are relevant for this evening's hearing. One of them was a condition that the 0.55 acre open space area north of the building and east of the existing homes on Maple Mere remained open space. And a deed restriction was in fact recorded as required by the Zoning Board of Appeals, and that has remained open space. And that's the open space looking north from the building that we are referencing. And if you go to the next, you'll see just another picture of the property. And then there's several others from the south looking north. This is adjacent to the building. So this is actually looking south. And it just shows you what is behind this parking area, and then it's essentially an extension to the north, which should be the next picture. Now, this is from the opposite side. These are from the north of the existing buffer area, looking back to the south. So the point is, there's trees in there, and it's remained open space since you approved it back in 2017. The other issue, that the condition of approval contained a provision that the parking not exceed 88 spaces. Existing now, there are 76 spaces on the property, and we are proposing to add 37 spaces, which would bring the total to 113. And the reason why we're doing all of this, and it's been like this basically since shortly after the cardiology center opened up, there is a lot of traffic in and out of this building. Unfortunately, there's the number of patients that have been part of the cardiology center is far more than what was originally anticipated, and the parking just has not been sufficient. The recent complicating factor was the elimination of the parking along Maple Mere from Maple Road to the driveway into the facility on Maple Mere. That has been eliminated, and that was an area that was being used for parking overflow, essentially with the staff and the visitors. So what's being proposed now is to maintain a 28-foot buffer area, as you can see here. And then we would add the additional spaces east of the buffer area. So we would do our best to keep the existing vegetation there, and as you have seen it, it is very thick. The other things that we have offered as mitigation is to erect a 6-foot board-on-board wood fence behind the properties on Maplemere. And we would agree to a condition of approval that that fence be installed. The other thing that we talked about is lighting on the property, and we would use dark sky lighting so that none of that would shine anywhere near the houses on Maplemere, and that would also be a condition. So if this board did grant the request today to eliminate those conditions from the 2017 approval, the next step would be for us to file an amended site plan with the planning board and have a public hearing before the planning board on the amended site plan. And then all of these issues could also be discussed there. I did see a letter from a homeowner on Maplemere today who raised a couple of questions that I'd like to address. One of them has to do with wetlands on the property, and the letter was correct that there are wetlands primarily in that green space buffer area. And whether they're in the green space buffer area or the proposed parking lot, those wetlands were determined to be isolated by the Army Corps of Engineers. So there would be no prohibition for us to impact them, but we're really not going to impact them because they're primarily in the buffer area. So that was one of the issues that was raised. The second issue that was raised was with respect to the drainage on the property. The letter indicated there's an existing problem now. The property is saturated for a great portion of the year, actually pools in some of their backyards. What we would say to that is what we typically say. And what's happening now is that water is not being controlled. And if the property is developed, it will be controlled. So I never make the statement that I would guarantee that it will be better, but it's likely that the drainage will be better because we will be putting in mitigation measures for the drainage that will take care of the existing water. And that will be one of the requirements of the site plan and will be reviewed by the engineering department and not approved by the engineering department unless we take care of the water. So those were really the main concerns that I think were raised in the letter. The other thing that I did want to point out is we will limit this parking to employees and staff, so that will minimize the disruption in that area. It won't be patients moving in and out all day long and all evening in some cases. And the other point I wanted to make is my clients would normally have been here, but one of them had a baby come prematurely, and they're taking care of that. The other one is covering for his partner and is working later hours, including this evening, and they would normally have been here. So the parking will be only for the staff and the employees. And the final point that I'd like to make is that it was a little odd in terms of how we structured the application. In meeting with Mr. Ulatowski prior to filing the application, it was determined that we would still call this a use variance, even though we are not required to meet the use variance standards. The use variance was granted for the entire parcel, so the only thing that we're asking for is modification of those conditions as I've indicated. Happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, I have a question. How many employees are there?
Currently, I don't know the exact number, but it's somewhere in the 20 to 25, and they're not all full-time employees.
Okay.
And they again, some are part-time, and it may be slightly more than that now.
Okay, because you're asking for 37 spaces, so if that's only going to be used for staff, and they don't even have that much staff, is there a possibility that your clients would reduce the number of requested spaces?
The reason why we show 37 is we need as many as we can get. We anticipate that this practice is going to continue to grow, and there will be additional employees added on. That's been the pattern since the beginning, that it started with a far fewer number of employees. They're now up to approximately 25, and they anticipate that number will grow.
So is the reason that you're asking for all these spaces is less about the reduction in parking on the street? Because when I Google Street View it, there's only enough space there for like 8
Handful.
cars.
Exactly, exactly. And the point is, we were willing to try to live with that all along, but it's really become a problem. And the last straw was the elimination of those 8 spaces, and that's why we're here today. We really did try to live with those requirements, but it's become an issue. I'm sure you've been over there at just about any time of day. That's busy.
Could they park farther down the street?
There's cars, again, I don't know if you've been there, but right now it's a mess with what's going on down at the end of the street. It's a mess.
Okay.
And there really isn't much parking on Maplemere.
Does anyone else have
I have a couple
comments?
comments. I know that when this was in front of the Traffic Safety Board, the neighbors were complaining about all the cars on the street. And I don't recall, but I think the other side is no parking, but I could be totally wrong.
The other side is no parking.
So, and the neighbors were complaining about the cars that were there already and the cars that were starting to migrate down the street in front of their unit. So the neighbors don't want those cars on the street. I remember that, and I think there was talk about, there's a house to the west, and I think there were conversations you've had with that owner who refuses to sell, because that would certainly solve a lot of your problems.
That house is to the east.
East.
Correct.
It's the one, was
Yeah.
an older woman?
Correct.
Right.
And that communication has been constant throughout the years in terms of trying to acquire that property.
So you're saying you're doing a 6-foot fence.
Yes.
So I think the real issue then is just handling the drainage and making sure the drainage, whatever is on the property doesn't leave the property. I mean, it will leave the property, but not to the adjacent homes.
Right. It'll be directed into the existing drainage, and it'll be handled that way in all likelihood. And as I said, I suspect that the drainage situation will be considerably improved after the parking lot goes in, if that happens.
Anyone else have questions? So I guess I'm still just left with the question of whether or not they would consider a reduction in the number of spaces you're requesting.
Well, the answer to that question is we'll take whatever we can get. We think that 37 is the most that can go there, and that's what we're hoping to get because we expect it to grow. If you feel that's, it's too many, we'll take whatever we can get. But I'm not sure there's a heck of a lot of difference between 25 spaces, for example, and 37.
Well, I guess because the neighbor who wrote in is like 3 houses down. So I'm trying to figure out if there was a way to lessen.
It's going to be very difficult for anyone with that fence and with that vegetation that's there to even know that parking's there.
Okay, well, let's see if there's anyone here from the audience to speak on this petition.
Judy Colton, Sunshine Drive. I've just picked up this real fast. I just want kind of an FYI. I was at those hearings in the beginning when this issue first came up. And as I recall, this was so inappropriate for this neighborhood. It was great discussion, should this even be allowed to be put in? And one of the compromises was, well, we promise we will never exceed the current employees, 6. We are never going to be open more than 5 days a week. The lighting is never going to impact the residents, and we will never extend into that wetlands or to bother those houses. And right now, everything that's said here today is like, everyone said, this is just a matter of time before they come around and change it again. So I just want you to, maybe you know this, but this should never have happened in the first place. And now it's going to change that neighborhood. They're going to suffer. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Kathy Ecolina from 215 Maple Road, and I followed this since the board denied rezoning because it was inappropriate for the site. After being denied, their attorney went to the ZBA after amending the plans, making it smaller, less parking and smaller building, where despite every situation the neighbors brought up, where there was not good for the site, the ZBA approved a variance to build the office building. And one of the things also brought up was the drainage, and a member of the planning board went and actually took pictures of the floods back there. So I don't know if they still have the pictures from day one, but one of the members actually took pictures. There was the restriction put on to keep the green space behind the neighbors' houses, which I noticed there's no pictures of the neighbors' houses, just of the grass and the trees. One of the situations brought up was there would be a request to lift the restriction, though the attorney said it wouldn't be. Sean. The changes to North Maplemere is the reason for this request. North Maplemere was supposed to be a dead end, but because the town couldn't put a traffic light in Amherst Manor, this changed, and that's why there's less parking there. They restricted the parking there. So the client should take this up with the town and work something out, and not impact the neighbors by removing the restriction. I'm sure there'll be more coming in front of the ZBA in the future regarding this. And as the prior person said, they weren't supposed to be open evenings. Now they're saying they're open evenings. They're open 6 days a week. There are people there on Saturday. We had to come in front of the ZBA to have them change their sign because it was in our windows all night. So everything we've said has come true. The cars making the U-turns on Maple Road causing traffic hazards because they miss Maplemere and they just stop and make a U-turn. They've turned in our driveway where we have to be careful if we're backing up to turn around because they just pull in. My sister-in-law just almost backed into somebody because they pulled in the driveway. So this has been a hazard from day one. It never should have gone there, as the town board said. And it's just going to keep growing. And as for the next door neighbor, I know from her grandson, they do continuously try to buy that property. And God knows what they're going to do with it if they ever get that. I hope Mrs. Vaccaro lives to 1,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here? No? Okay. Mr. Palumbo, do you want to respond to any of that?
The only thing I would say is that the hours of operation were never restricted. There may have been discussion. I did not handle the use variance application about what was being proposed, but there was never any restriction on the hours or the days of the week. And again, there's nothing nefarious here. We're just simply trying to resolve a problem that exists. And as Mr. Schubert indicated, the neighbors have consistently said that they don't like any of our people parking on Maplemere. So we're trying to resolve that issue at the same time. Thank you.
Okay. Dan, can you speak to the wetlands issue?
I did a history just this evening. When the planning board first looked at the rezoning request in 2016, the planning board was provided with a wetland delineation. We have a determination from the Army Corps of Engineers that indicates that it is an isolated wetland and that Army had no jurisdiction over it. So Mr. Plum was correct that because it is an isolated wetland, they would not need permission to fill it. Also within that recommendation, the planning board actually recommended the approval of rezoning, and then the town board, who has full discretion on rezoning decisions, denied the rezoning request. Planning board, in their recommendation, recommended that the parking that was proposed originally be limited to employees only, and it was not the full extent of that area. Half of the area still would have been open space, but that was at the rezoning request before the planning board. I just want to remind the board members that we did provide a draft seeker determination, so if you, before you wish to consider the request, we ask that you make a determination on the seeker provided for you.
Okay. Well,
I guess I have a question.
why don't we start with your question, Mr. Schubert?
Mr. Palumbo, I guess the main concern here, I'm not hearing that there are issues with how it's going to look, but I think there are issues with drainage. And has any thought gone into assisting, I don't know how many, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 parcels there, assisting those parcels with their drainage? I mean, there's an opportunity here, if you're putting in drainage for the parking, there's an opportunity to assist these people. I think the third house said that they had water sitting on their property. I don't know if there's an opportunity here to kind of
Yeah.
remediate that
Certainly.
as a sign of good faith.
Sure. I don't think my client would have any objection to that. I think it's sort of a two-edged sword because the more drainage you have within the buffer area, the more trees that are going to be removed to accommodate that drainage. But that's not to say that we won't look at it. I can't stand here today and commit that we will resolve all the drainage problems, but in the course of the site plan approval, we'll certainly look at it, and if we can improve it, we will do that.
I guess what I'm saying is if you're putting drain tile or drain pipe in through that parking lot, there's probably the opportunity to tee it off and pick up any water that might be on the adjoining,
Sure.
as a sign of good faith. Because that's what I was reading primarily, was that there's a lot of water now, not after you do what you're doing,
Right.
on one of those properties.
I'm a layman when it comes to engineering, but it sort of sounds like it would be like a rear yard drainage issue.
Right.
Something that we could accommodate their water, if that's the way it's going, flowing. So, yeah, but definitely take a look at it.
Okay. Do we want to start by having a motion with respect to the neg deck? Anyone have a motion with respect to approval? I should also note for the record that Member Parker is going to abstain from this vote, as her husband is a patient there, so she felt the need to abstain. So it would be 4 voting members. So do we have a motion with respect to issuing the neg deck? Or do we? Okay. Seconded by Member Schubert. Any opposition? No opposition being raised, that will carry 4-0. That will carry 4-0 with respect to the negative declaration. Now, do we want to have a conversation with respect to the request to remove the condition that was previously placed on the parcel? Or do we have any motions?
I'll just state my opinion, and just speaking for myself, this was a political compromise that was made in 2017. I'm sure there's a lot of factors that went into it that, us sitting here in 2023 are not cognizant of. And it's, for me personally, it's going to take a lot more than we want more parking for us to overrule the previous decision of a ZBA board.
Yeah, I tend to agree, especially since none of us were here during those conversations. I would be willing to say that if there are approximately 20 employees, that maybe that would be like the cap on parking. I don't know if anyone else has any feelings on that.
I guess my feeling, I'm not concerned about the number of spaces. Maybe it's appropriate to adjourn this and go back and look at the drainage plan and work with the neighbors and see what you can do, sign of good faith. I mean, you're going onto their property now and seeing what you can do to handle their problems. I mean, if this goes in and you have a fence and you're not creating any issues in terms of drainage for them and actually helping them out with their problem, then everybody would probably be happy.
I don't know, I'm not really getting the sense that that's going to be the be-all, end-all. I mean, for me, what I'm hearing is, and I was here at least, not for the original limitations, but I know that this was before us, I want to say last year on the lighting issue, and there seems to be an overarching concern by the neighbors about how this is evolving. I think there's a sense that it's getting too big for what it was initially intended, and what's next. So I think that's where my overarching concern is what's the next issue we're going to see here, because the business has grown, which is a great problem for the business owners to have, but not so great for the neighbors. So, while I certainly think there's always, the potential to have a discussion about resolution of some drainage issues, I don't necessarily know if that solves the overarching problem.
Yeah, and I seem to recall, I think at the last time that we were here with respect to the lighting, there was conversations with the neighbors who are here, I believe, about fixing that lighting issue, and I think that was resolved. So perhaps maybe we adjourn and see if there can be conversation with these parcels that are going to be affected, and see what their thoughts are, and maybe we can revisit this next month. Okay, so I will move to adjourn. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, any opposition? Hearing none, we will adjourn this matter till next month. Thank you. And then the next item up on the agenda is number 9, 6569 and 6571 Main Street.
Good evening. My name is Dave Sutton from Sutton Architecture, here today to request the renewing of 2 variances at the property 6569, 6571 Main Street. Just to give you a little background, several years ago, I think it was the end of 2017, we appeared in front of the current Zoning Board of Appeals, and some of the members are new, so I will give some background on the project as a result. We are proposing to demo the existing building at 6571, which was used as an office building, and we are proposing to replace it and enlarge it with a new cultural center. The group that is asking for the variance is experienced not only some growth in their congregation or place of worship, but also in their offerings. It's going to be an educational center that has a place of worship. They intend to, and they currently occupy the building on the corner of Ridge Court and Main, and they intend to maintain that and use that as their educational facility and relocate their place of worship to the new proposed building at 6571 Main Street. As a result of this, the demo of the building and the replacement of the building in the exact same location requires 2 variances. One variance is the distance from the center line of Main Street. I believe the code requires 115 feet for distance from the center line of Main Street, and the actual existing building is 74, just about 75 feet from the center line of Main Street. We are interested in proposing the location of the new building in the exact same location or distance from Main Street that is currently at the building that's there. This is for obvious reasons, to maintain a streetscape, to allow for the most efficient use of the property, and to allow us to achieve the size and the program requirements for this building. The second variance is the side yard setback. This is once again a very unique situation. As you can see on the map indicated, the property directly adjacent to us to the east is zoned R3. It's actually a mixed-use building, has some businesses on the first floor, second floor apartments, but its zoning classification is R3. As a result, the setback requirement is rather extensive from a commercial building to a residential by zoning district. Once again, the building itself is actually more of classified of a mixed-use building. So it's a very unique situation, and the variance that we're requesting is just over a 10-foot distance separation and property line from the building to the property line, which the actual requirement based on the zoning is 137 feet because of height of building and distance from a residence. Obviously, the distance is meant to protect the residential districts. This is a little bit unique. Now, our request is to basically put in a building that we feel is in keeping with the property and the surrounding properties and allows for a maximum use of the property. We did go in front of the Zoning Board of Appeals, did an extensive presentation balancing out the detriments, potential detriments, and the proposed benefits. I'll gladly go through those again if you want, but they're all on file, and we're just today asking for a renew of an already approved variance, which was done, I think, in December of 17. Mr. Ulatowski might be able to confirm the date. We were kind of sidelined with the project based on fundraising, and then, of course, COVID hit, which put a screeching halt to the program entirely, and we are now at a comfortable state to move forward with the project and require a renew of these variances in order to move forward. So once again, I can go through the 5 criteria if you want, or answer any questions this board might have.
It sounds like we have a question from Member Schubert.
So what's on here, what you're requesting now, you've already requested before, and it's already been approved.
It's the exact same footprint, exact same variance criteria. Correct.
And the new building is the exact same as
Footprint.
the existing.
Exact same footprint.
Okay, does anyone else have questions? Okay, do we have anyone here from the audience to speak on this petition? Okay, seeing no one come forward, we'll close the public hearing at this time. I would note that there are 2 requests for variances. I would move to approve them both together. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, do we have any, I think that we've gone through the test, and the history also is on record with the last time that this was requested. Do we have any opposition to the request? Hearing none, the motion is granted 5-0. You're all set.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
You too. Next up, we're skipping items 10 and 11 that have been adjourned. We're on to number 12 on the agenda, which is 4224 and 4256 Ridgely Road. And we will take that along with item number 13, which is the same address. We'll hear the petitions at the same time.
I can't hear you. Oh, I'm sorry, let me come over here. I'm about to do that. Andy. That's 2? Really?
We're discussing who has to recuse.
Just for the record, I have to recuse myself because I am counsel to Benderson, so I can't participate in this.
Okay, I mean, you do whatever you feel is appropriate. Okay, it sounds like then it will be a vote by 4 members of the board.
Okay.
Okay, hold that thought for 1 moment while Member Phillips talks to the town attorney. Okay, we're back on, and it will be 4 members to vote on this petition.
Thank you.
All right.
Good evening. My name is James Baglioli. I'm an attorney with Benderson Development, 570 Delaware Avenue, Buffalo, New York, for the applicant. I'm going to start with the special use permit. That's the first thing on the agenda. The board is probably familiar with the property. It's highlighted in yellow on the site plan, on this aerial. It's bounded by North Bailey to the west, by Meyer to the south, and to the I-290 to the north and the east. The property is currently improved with 17 buildings totaling 480,000 square feet. The 10 buildings located in the center were the former UB Annex that existed there sometime in the past. The property currently maintains 3 driveways onto North Bailey and 3 driveways under the Ridgely Road extension, which is up at the top of the site. The property is a mix of zoning districts, shopping center, which is a majority of the property, and then where the warehouse is going, I'll show you in a minute, is zoned RD and general industrial. Next slide, please. This is the proposed site plan for the project we're working on with the town. The special use permit is part of an overall redevelopment of this property. I'll just walk through it. We're proposing to demolish 13 buildings off the site. We're proposing 120,000 square feet Dick's House of Sports up to the north with a 18,000 square foot sports field and 388 parking stalls, plus or minus. We're proposing 109,000 square foot warehouse building down here with about 163 parking spaces. And we're proposing 167,000 square foot Costco located adjacent to the 290 with about 774 parking spaces. Part of the Costco proposal is a gas station. That is the colored area on the site plan, and that's the subject of the special use permit. We're going to provide 8 pump islands with 16 fuel positions, no diesel, just all regular gas for customers. It's located on North Bailey. You can see the zoom in up to the top. There are no curb cuts from the gas station onto North Bailey, and it's going to operate through the 2 signalized driveways. Coming around, you're going to enter from the back of the site, and all the traffic is one way through the pumps and back out to the internal driveway system for the shopping center. The project does propose significant road improvements, including a relocation of Romney Road to form a 4-way intersection, a number of traffic signals, road widening, and the like. Next slide, please. It's going to be a fueling station with no convenience store. So if you've been to a Costco or a BJ's, there's a little booth out there for a person that stays out there, and then there is the fueling stations. You can't buy anything there except gas. Next slide, please. I did submit a letter going through the 8 criteria for a special use permit. I'll quickly walk through them. I know this board reads all the letters, so I'm not going to read the letter. Whether it will generally be consistent with the policies of the comprehensive plan. The town board recently rezoned this site, the shopping center, to permit this project. They made the determination that was consistent in that rezoning, that was consistent with the comprehensive plan. Does it meets the specific criteria established in the code? It's completely code compliant. It only needs a special use permit. There are no variances required. Next criteria, will it be compatible with the existing uses adjacent to and near the property? We own everything abutting this site except the 290 and this gas station. It is compliant with everything around it. To the west, we have the Boulevard Shopping Center, which is a large commercial shopping center. To the north, we have the proposed Dick's, if you look at the gas station. To the south, we have the Key Bank. And to the east, we have the Costco. Further around it, we have Amherst Development Park, which is a big mixed-use warehouse research development park. And we have a shopping center anchored by TJ Maxx. The fueling facility is consistent with those commercial uses, and that's a consistent layout throughout the town where you see gas stations with commercial uses side by side. So we do believe that it is compatible with the existing uses. The next criteria is, will it be in harmony with the general purpose of the ordinance? The answer again is yes, it's code compliant, and the town board did rezone this property to permit this project, which included a fueling station. Will it not tend to depreciate the value of the adjacent property? We own all the adjacent property, everything abutting this, and all the shopping centers around it. As all the abutting property owners, we do not believe it's going to depreciate the value. In fact, this redevelopment of this, I would say, underutilized commercial site will be a big improvement. Will it alter the essential character of the community? I don't believe the gas station will, as I know it's consistent with what's around it. Will it be detrimental to the public convenience? A traffic study was done for the entire project. Traffic improvements are being made. This gas station is not going to be detrimental. There are no curb cuts actually on North Bailey. It's going to feed the internal roads of the shopping center. So none of the traffic from this is going to come out onto North Bailey directly. And that is basically the project. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So that's the,
Special use permit.
special use. Do you want to also?
I
should
don't
we
know
do
if you
them
want to vote
separate?
on that. If you have questions, vote on it first.
Okay. We'll do the votes separately. I guess it's fine. I don't see anyone in the audience who I think is here. Is anyone here to speak on this project? I see no one come forward, so we'll close the public hearing.
We have a seeker determination first.
Yep. Do we have a motion with respect to the seeker? Okay. All right. Any opposition? Hearing none, passes 4-0. Do we have any motions?
Motion for approval. Special use permit.
Okay, we have a second. I think that we have heard the balancing test and the criteria sufficiently. Do we have any opposition? Hearing none, passes 4-0. Then we'll move into the next request.
So I'm not going to walk through the property again, since we just did it. And I know you want to go home. I will go to the next slide, please. I'm not going to walk through the project. You're familiar with it. Next slide, please. There are 3 variances that are required. I'm going to just go through them. The first variance is the proposed setback for the Dick's Building. House of Sports is 20 feet, where 30 feet is required. All right, and I'm going to show you, just if you look at this plan, this is the Dick's section. There is a large 50-foot wide gas pipeline easement in the back, which restricts where we can move the building, because it's pressed, the building is actually chamfered, so they can be pressed as far back as possible to fit that. That drives the setback, and if you look at the setback, it's 20 feet only at this section right here for 13 feet. The rest of it is 32 feet, which exceeds the setback. North Bailey cuts in right where the Dick's is, so that's what generates the variance. A majority of this building actually completely complies with the variance. The next is the vehicle use area. That is right here. It sits 6.1 feet from the right-of-way, 25 feet is required. I'll walk through that in a minute. And the final is the Dick's House of Sports and the Costco. In 2 areas, we're missing 3 feet of landscape against the building. Those are a result of how the site lays out, but we did provide more landscaping than's required when you average it over the building. There's just certain sections where it doesn't fit based on this gas easement and the shape of this property. If you're familiar with this property, you go back to the aerial. The 290 curves around, making the property not square. The easement cuts off the top, so where we could slide things becomes restricted. And I'll just walk through that quickly. I won't read the whole letter. Next slide, please. So just going through the variances, there's 5 criteria. Whether an undesirable change in the area character would occur. For the building setback and Dick's, as I noted, the variance only applies for 16th section of the building on the southwest corner. North Bailey has an approximate 12-foot long jog in that area. The remainder of the building is completely compliant at 32 feet. For the vehicle use area, the property currently maintains a 2-foot setback, 2 foot 3 inches. We're proposing 6.12, which is an increase. I'll talk in a minute why we can't move that. And finally, the landscape areas. Dick's, the required landscaping is provided on all 3 sides. Only on the front side, we don't provide that for 3 feet, and that's because we don't have the room. We currently have I believe, a 10-foot sidewalk. If we have to provide the 3-foot landscaping, it'll be a 7-foot setback sidewalk, and it's too narrow to protect the pedestrians. I'll walk through that. And Costco, again, on the northwest, we do not have the landscaping, but the sidewalk's only 5 feet, so you can't fit the landscaping. And, but we did double the landscape islands on the opposite side to provide that landscaping. And then finally, on the other side, facing the 290, we don't have the landscaping. That's where the truck access is, but we did provide 5 feet of landscaping on the other side of the drive aisle to make up for that. So we kind of moved the landscaping around. The site's not deficient overall landscaping. We certainly exceed the landscaping. We just had to relocate it to make the site work and fit. Next slide, please. And just going, the next criteria is whether we can do this without the variance relief. For the Dick's House of Sports setback, we're bounded by the 2 petroleum pipelines and the easement. That creates a hard stopping point for the building. We already jogged the building by cutting it. That's as far as they could go without not taking the site. The building can't be set back beyond the jog of the back wall, so we can't shift it due to the pipelines. That results in that one section that's close. The vehicle use area, if we have to comply with the 25 feet, we're going to lose 12 parking spaces. And I know you may be thinking, it's a lot of parking there. 12 parking spaces is a lot to give up. For Dick's, they would leave the site. So We are actually below what the tenants require for their code parking, because Amherst parking is below that. So we are at the lowest possible number, and we actually had to cut a lot of parking because we created parking rooms as required by the new town code, which is wrapping the parking and landscaping. So you have significant landscaping on the outside. We exceed the landscaping requirements for those areas. So that's what generates that variance. And the two for the Dick's and the Costco as far as adjacent to the buildings. Again, we have the pipeline, which reduces how far we can push the building back to increase the sidewalk to pick up to 3 feet. And it will result in a 7-foot sidewalk if you have to eat it. If you go across the street, the sidewalks are 15 feet wide. So that's typically what we do. That provides adequate walking distance. You're separated from the cars. At 7 feet, you're practically in the drive aisle. So that's what that variance is required. And as I mentioned for the Costco, we have the truck access around the building and the 5-foot sidewalk in the back, but neither of those, we've mitigated those with additional landscaping. Next slide, please. I won't read the rest of the project. We don't believe the requested variance is substantial. We designed these to compensate for the variances to pick up landscaping and the like. We're consistent with the surrounding area, and the project is set in an entirely commercial area and is consistent with this area. We don't believe there's any physical, adverse, or environmental impacts. The town board did issue a neg deck pursuant to seeker as part of this. They did rezone the property for this. This was the site plan the whole time. And then whether the hardship is self-created, I'd argue initially it's not. We're trying to redevelop an existing site. It's an irregularly shaped site with significant easements that control where we could put things and the road jogs. Even if it is, that criteria is not determinable. There's no harm with this project. This project's going to be a significant improvement to the site. So I'm happy to answer any questions the board has.
Any questions? Hearing none. Do we have anyone from the audience to speak on this petition? Seeing no one come forward, we'll close the public hearing. We've definitely gone through that language test. Do we have any motions?
Motion for approval.
Okay, do we have any opposite? Oh, I'm sorry, and is that all 3 requests?
Yes, that's all 3 requests.
And second, all 3 requests. Okay. Do we have any opposition? Hearing none, all 3 requests are granted, 4-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, no opposition. There we go. Our friend Aunt Joint was texting and calling me.